Thank you. On Sunday, we spoke about how God supplies, how Jesus supplies. And I want you to see in this story how we have the advantage on the next few chapters of seeing the overlay of it, the kind of Monday morning quarterback kind of look at it. But God is taking care of absolutely everything and everybody. He's going to take care of the Amalekites. He's taking care of David. He's going to take care of everything. And we left last week by discussing how David had got himself in a mess, but God gets him out of it. 200 of the men are exhausted and they stay at the brook. And 400 men go with David to chase after the Amalekites, the raiders, because he's asked God, should we go? And God said yes. So based on the word of God, they go. Solely on the word of God, David and 400 men go to find the raiders. And in verse 11, we spoke about it, I think, last week. It says, along the way. So because David went along the way, he's going to find something. Along the way, they found an Egyptian man in a field. I think we spoke about this last week, but this is truly amazing. How many people thought that God was going to use an Egyptian man in a field to make David's plan work? This is what God does, right? God finds a way. We say it a lot, but where there is no other way. But God uses people. He uses situations. He uses everything to supply what he needs to supply. They just happen to be walking along the way, and an Egyptian man is in a field. And this Egyptian man is brought to David. Think about that. An Egyptian man who has been mistreated is now forever chronicled in the Word of God. His name isn't there. But this Egyptian man who would have been down on his luck, depressed, discouraged, is simply in the field, and they bring him to David. They gave him some bread to eat and water to drink. In verse 12 it says they gave him part of a fig cake, 2 clusters of raisins. He hadn't had anything to eat or drink for 3 days and nights. But before long his strength returned. See, God can help an Egyptian out whilst helping David out, whilst taking care of the Amalekites. I mean, God's got all of this going all at the same time. And they feed this Egyptian. And in verse 13, they say, who do you belong to and where do you come from? When I read that, I just thought, man, those are really good questions for our life. When you come to Christ, we belong to him. We often think that the cross is free, and I understand why people say that. But we belong to Jesus. Galatians says we no longer live, but Christ now lives within us. And every decision we make should be based on the fact that who we belong to. And thank God, because of Jesus, who we belong to changed. You realize that when we came into the world, we belong to this world. We belong to the commander of the prince of the power of this air. We belong to the devil, really. And God changes that, and Christ changes that, and we're no longer following our own lustful desires. We're no longer dead in our trespasses and sin, and because of Jesus, we can belong to God. Amen. Listen, life gets hard at times, right? But if you belong to God, how bad can it be? Remember the Lord's Prayer, our Father. That's how he starts it. That's how he tells them to pray. Remember, you have a Father who is in heaven. To whom do you belong, man? When you're discouraged, you need to think about that. Who do you belong to? Or when God is calling you to do something. And this is a massive one. And where do you come from? Now I know he's talking geographically. I know he's talking different here. But those are pertinent questions for us today. Who do you belong to and where do you come from? Do you remember where you were before Jesus? I mean, how far? And by the way, you haven't come near the way you're going to come. I mean, no matter how far you've come, God has got more for you. One day you're going to go so far as to be like Jesus. That's a long, long way from where he found you. Amen. The Bible says that God who began the good work will complete it. You used to belong to the world. You used to belong to the devil. Wherever you came from, and God is going to take us a long, 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 long way. He says, I'm an Egyptian, the slave of an Amalekite. They're the enemy of God. Both of them really, an Egyptian and the slave of an Amalekite. My master abandoned me 3 days ago because I was sick. This is what God does, right? God is always doing things when we least expect it. Nobody looked at the Egyptian. Nobody knew he was there. What chance did this Egyptian have of living? What chance did this Egyptian have of being cared for? And if you look at the story, you just think it's over. His master has abandoned him 3 days ago. He was sick. He was sick. And so his master thought, you have no use to me. And so he gave him up. How many times do you think the Egyptian sat in the field and said, don't worry, God's going to come after me? He didn't know but God is going to take care of this Egyptian. He's going to take care of David. He's going to take care of all of these things. And he says, my master abandoned me because I was sick. We were on our way back from raiding the Kerethites in the Negev, the territory of Judah, and the land of Caleb. And then he says this, and we had just burned Ziklag. David's ears perk up. Well, you did what? You burnt Ziklag. And see, this is David. David is very, part of you might want to be like, oh, you're part of this one? I'll lead. But David says to him, will you lead me to this band of raiders? David has been struggling. David hasn't exactly been a great example at all times. But in this moment, God has told him to go, and nothing is going to deter him from going. Nothing. He's already lost a third of his troops. He had 600, 200 have sat back. Nothing at this. David's this weird character of like brilliance and then problems. And 400 go with him, and he says, will you just take me to this band of raiders? The young man replied, if you take an oath in God's name that you will not kill me or give me back to my master, I'll guide you to them. Look at what the guy says. I'll help you out. I'll do it. Just don't kill me. And please, 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 don't send me back to that guy. Don't send me back to that master. Verse 16, obviously they agree. He led David to them. He led David to them. See, in this supply, in this provision, God can get you wherever he needs to get you to by however means he chooses. God is getting David, the king that's going to be king, to exactly where he needed to be through one man laying sick in the field. What God did 3 days ago, you have no idea why. Don't give up on him. Don't quit on him. Don't get disheartened. Maybe your sickness is going to... See, that guy's sickness ended up being a really good thing. What the master did to him, God turned out. It doesn't tell you if the Egyptian found God or whatever, but man, he had some good influence, didn't he? He definitely saw the difference between his master and David. The first thing David did was feed him. His master said, you're sick, I'm done with you. He leads David to them. You imagine, why are you going here? Well, I asked God and he told us to go. Verse 16, they found the Amalekites spread out across the fields, eating and drinking and dancing with joy because of the vast amount of plunder they had taken from the Philistines and the land of Judah. This is the difference. God is working things out for his people, and we sit there perplexed. The world is absolutely gone. They're about to be attacked, and they have no clue. They're eating, drinking, and be merry because tomorrow they just might what? They might die. Do you see the arrogance and the ignorance of the Amalekites? And God has let them do what he wanted to do. God is perpetually training David over and over and over again. We're going to see it in a bit. David was part of this deal, and God allowed Ziklag to be burnt because he's training David. He's constantly training David. Trust me, follow me, obey me. Little things kill you. We'll talk about that in a bit. So here David goes, and they found the Amalekites. They're spread out, eating and drinking and dancing with joy because of the vast amount of plunder they had taken from the Philistines in the land of Judah. That's what they were excited about. Plunder, stuff. Verse 17, I love this. David and his men rushed in among them. They just went for it. They got there. Look, when you get to the camp and the Egyptian has led you there, you know that's God, right? There's certain times where you need to be confident because you know that God got me here. And if God got you here, then he'll sustain you where you're at. And it says they didn't wait around. They didn't try and figure out a master plan. It just says they saw this, and David and his men rushed in among them and slaughtered them throughout that night and the entire next day until evening. Did you catch that, right? I mean, physically that had to be difficult, didn't it? But we read things like that, and what we don't understand is when God has called you or anointed you in any way, he will provide you physical strength. He'll provide you spiritual strength. God is on the hook for everything. How did David and his men go into this camp? There's only 400 of them. And rush in and slaughter them throughout that night. It doesn't say it was close. It says they slaughtered them. Because God can give you power and he can stop the enemy. He can stop anything he wants. And God is just all over David. Again, this is God's grace and mercy because David has been off a bit in left field. But God is showing him and training him. And it says they rushed in, and that night and the entire next day until evening, none of the Amalekites escaped except 400 young men who fled on camels. David goes in and he wins. And what's that? I mean, why? Why is all this happening? Man, David's about to see when the hand of the Lord is upon you, when you obey God, when you do what he asks you to do, it's Goliath all over again. You can't get beat. God's going to help you. God's going to strengthen you. And look at what it says, verse 18. David got back everything the Amalekites had taken, and he rescued his 2 wives. Everything that was taken, all the physical stuff he took back. And he rescued his 2 wives. I find it funny that the stuff gets mentioned first, and then he rescued his wives. I have no idea what that means. I'm not going to comment on that. Nothing was missing. See, even in that, if God wants you to have something, he can protect it. None of the stuff is missing. None of it. They haven't slaughtered anything. They haven't killed any animals. They haven't done anything with it. They've kept the wives safe. They've kept the children safe. It says David got back everything the Amalekites had taken, and he rescued his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, small or great, son or daughter, nor anything else that had been taken. David brought everything back. Don't you know that that's God's way of saying, I got this? I've helped you? Like, physically speaking, that shouldn't be true. Like, how did David have his wives and kid back? And the people have their children? How did all of that happen? How did this happen? God was all over it. And he brought everything back. Nothing was missing, small or great, son or daughter. Verse 20, he recovered all the flocks and herds, and his men drove them ahead of the other livestock. This plunder belongs to David. This is what God's grace is, right? He didn't just give them what they were taking back, he gave them more. They didn't just get their stuff back, they looted what the Amalekites had had. They come in, they destroy the Amalekites because God's against them. If God before you, who can be against you? And so David doesn't just get the stuff back. God gives him more stuff. God gives him more plunder. And so they come in, they wipe out the Amalekites, all their stuff is back, and they gain all this stuff. God is building memorial stones. God is showing them. God is proving himself to them. And don't you know, when everything's going good, when everything's going great, things start to happen. You see, look what happens. David goes back to the brook and met up with the 200 men who had been left behind because they were too exhausted to go with him. They went out to meet David and his men, and David greeted them. How did David greet them? Joyfully. I think they were actually probably looking after some stuff there. I don't think they were just sitting around doing nothing. But remember, 200 of them were exhausted. 200 of them said, I can't fight this battle. I'm going to stay by the brook. And God did it through 400 of them. And David meets them with joy. But this is what the devil does. Like right in the midst of all of this, right when God is building a testimony, right where there's joy and peace and power and grace and memorial stones being built in the middle of the camp, It says in verse 22, some evil troublemakers among David's men. Look, among who? Oh, man. So in that 400, there are some, the Bible describes them as evil troublemakers. But God, even through those evil troublemakers, prevailed, right? He used evil troublemakers for his own good, for his own glory. They didn't stop David winning. And in the midst of it, David is protected. David somehow is not overcome by these evil troublemakers. And God is here's what's really comforting. God knows before you do where the trouble's at. Like it takes us a minute sometimes to figure out their trouble. It takes us a minute to realize some things, but God knew it from the beginning. He knew with Judas from the beginning. And yet in the midst of this, in the evil troublemakers, God is using them, and he's going to teach, he's going to teach David, he's going to teach his men. Look at what it says. So they meet the 200. It's like this grand reunion, and yet some of them, you see why they're evil and troublemakers, because they're greedy. And greed will make you start trouble. And greed will send you down a wrong path. Whether it's greedy for fame, greedy for money, greedy for whatever it is, greed is not good, right? And it says, they didn't go with us, so they can't have any of the plunder we recovered. You can kind of see their thinking, right? You can get your stuff back. Your wife and your kids you can have. But this extra stuff, you ain't having it. We had to put our lives on the line. Meanwhile, you've been sparring it up over here, and we ain't doing that. They get indignant. They're enraged because, and as you see, you think, and they've just been called evil troublemakers. But do you see how we struggle with that? What I mean by that is, Jesus talks about this parable about the wages, remember? And he speaks about how people came early in the morning, and then people came right at the end of the day, and God paid them the same. And the people are like complaining and fussing, and God's like, hold on, I'm God, I get to. We are very quick to realize what we should have, like we deserve this. That's what they're saying. We went out to fight, we deserve it. Do you know how gracious God has been? Hold on, how gracious has God been to those 400 men? How gracious has God been? Not only to keep them alive, they found that all of this stuff. I mean, God has been good to these four. The only reason they're alive and victorious is the hand of God. They've got to be with David. I mean, they've been on a wild ride. But remember, hold on, when we met them, what were they? They were discontents. They were broke. They had no options. And so David took them in. And God has been good to these men. 600 of them, these 400. God has been really, really good to them. And yet the grace that they so easily received, they're not so great at giving back. Like they now take ownership. They think what they have is theirs. And you deserve it. You realize what we deserve? I mean, if you pray, God, give me what I deserve. Hold on. Hold on. No, well, you would get something. It just wouldn't be what you wanted. And they say to them, and you imagine, it's not great for team morale, right? They didn't go with us. They can't have any of the plunder. Hold on, who made you the boss? Who gave them the authority to make that decision? Nobody did. Give them their wives and children and tell them to be gone. And then David said, and see this, David has been in this kind of spiritual wilderness. He hasn't been writing Psalms. But then something happens. David stands and says, no, my brothers, the idea of family, of unity, don't be selfish with what the Lord has given us. If you catch nothing else, this is probably one of the main points. I want you to sit and think about that for a moment. What in the world has God given to you? Think about all the things God has given to you. I'm not talking just about your car and your money and your house. And yeah, all of that is his, by the way. He's given you children. He's given you grace. I mean, if you were to try and if we were to say, right, we're just going to stop and give thanks for all that God has given us, we'd be here a long time. Basically, he owns everything, right? And this is the spiritual struggle that we have. They have received from the Lord, and in receiving from the Lord, they're like, I don't want to share that with them. I deserve this. Well, grace you can't earn. So I want us to think about this tonight, because this is one of our biggest struggles. He says, don't be selfish with what the Lord has given us. So as you think tonight about what God has given you, you have to wonder what is easy for you to share and what isn't. Maybe we have more idols in our lives than what we'd like to admit. Like, what is it that you won't share? What is it that God's given to you and you turn around and say, I'm grateful for it, I'm glad you gave me it, but I ain't sharing? That's what we struggle with. Everybody has areas where they don't care, they'll give it. Some people will give you money, some people will give you time, some people can give you service, some people give... There's things in your life that everything God has given you is from God. So, I mean, there's a sense in which he's given you everything. But there's things that you don't mind giving. But then there's things that we really, really struggle to give. Maybe saying sorry, maybe asking for, being forgiving, whatever. But he looks at him and he's basically saying, hold on, guys, God gave you that. And if God gave you it and God owns it and God blessed you with it, how in the world can you be selfish with it? And we look at our lives and we think, God, you've given me my resources, you've given me my service, you've given me my money, you've given my time. And we fall into that sly temptation of thinking it's ours, or somehow we deserve it. And that phrase really got me. Don't be selfish with what the Lord has given us. He has kept us safe. It's God. Guys, it's God that did it. We didn't do it. See, they think they've earned it. Like, I'm a warrior. I fought. No, that was God. That wasn't you. That was God. Like, whatever you've achieved, that's God. That's not you. Oh, I achieved this. I did this. I made this. No. That's the hand of God, because without the hand of God, it wouldn't be built. Like, if God isn't in it, if God doesn't put you in that position, you can't be in that position. And we like to think, I built my business, I built my empire, I built this, or pastors might think they built a church. They didn't. And if a pastor did build it, it's not worth going to. Look at what it says. He has kept us safe and helped us defeat the band of raiders that attacked us. God, it's you we owe. You gave us safety and you gave us help, and we've been able to defeat them because of you. And in response to that, God, whatever you would have me to give back, I give back. Like whatever, and that's the problem. When God gives you something, when he blesses you, he has never said keep it for yourself. Like hoard it. Like every time God gives us something, he wants us to give out of that. In fact, that's the whole cycle that Corinthians talks about. God is going to give you what you need. He's going to give you what you need, and he's going to give you a little bit extra. And that extra isn't to hoard or to... That extra is to go and help other people. And as you help other people, God will bless them, and God will use their testimony, because they'll know God gave it to them. And then as you get lack, God will give you again, and he'll keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. But the cycle says as God keeps giving, so do you have to keep giving. Like maybe God's giving you more time. You're like, oh man, when God gives us more time in our life, if he's not included in that, we're off base. Like, oh, I've got all of this time now. Now I can do all these things. Well, hold on. God should be in there somewhere. And they look at their fellow people and they're like, nah, you ain't getting it. You ain't getting it. And then David says, who's going to listen when you talk like this? Now, you've heard this. Your parents have said this. We share and share alike. Now, here's what's funny about that. Who loves that saying? Who loves that saying? The person on one end. Who hates it? The person on the other end, right? I mean, if you're the one getting, share and share alike becomes a good thing. If you're the one that has, share and share alike becomes a problem. right? But we've all been beneficiaries of both. Don't you understand that God gives us that, and then he says, share. Share everything I've given to you. Like those who go to battle and those who guard the equipment. See, they weren't just doing nothing. They were guarding the equipment. From then on, David made this a decree and regulation for Israel, and it's still followed today. When he arrived at Ziklag, so David makes a decree, and it was still in force, that if you're part of a team and you get plunder, it gets shared. You don't start divvying up between like who did what, and God's gonna supply all of them. And by the way, if the 200 go without and don't have their needs met, that's not good for anybody. Like that would be like a church having all of these rich folk, all of these poor folk, and no one wants to share, and eventually the poor folk just pass away. Well, that's not good for anybody. When he arrived at Ziklag, David sent part of the plunder to the elders of Judah who were his friends. This is kind of astute of David. He's about to be king of Judah, and he sends the plunder on. Here's a present for you taken from the Lord's enemies, he said. The gifts were sent to the people of the following towns David had visited: Bethel, Ramoth, Negev, Jattir, all of these places. You can read them. Hebron, verse 31, Hebron and all the other places David and his men had visited. In other words, it was kind of like a thank you. It was kind of like a political move. It was a savvy move. He was giving some of the plunder to his. Which also teaches everybody to share again. Not only are they having to share the plunder with each other, but now David is taking some of the plunder and sharing it with other people too. David has been in this roller coaster. He's been 16 months in Philistine country. He was ready to fight. He got himself in a mess. God got him out. He goes home, finds his town burned down, all the children and women are gone. He goes, he finds this Egyptian. He goes, fights the Amalekites, wipes them out, and he comes back to Ziklag. It's been quite the journey, huh? And this is one of the saddest chapters in the Bible, chapter 31. The Philistines attacked Israel, and the men of Israel fled before them. So in that fight that David had to leave, the Philistines win. Remember, David was going to be in that fight. God pulls him out, and the Philistines attack Israel, and the men of Israel fled before them. Many were slaughtered. See, the reason that is so dangerous is because that gives you the wrong connotation of what's going on. The Philistines attacked Israel, and the men of Israel fled before them. This is so bad in so many ways, because it gives a connotation that God's not there, or God's asleep, or God doesn't protect, or God doesn't provide, or God doesn't win. And if you got to understand that Israel was the light of the world. That Israel was God's people. That Israel was who God used to show himself to the world. If there was no Israel, there's nothing. God used Israel. All of their stuff, the tabernacle, the temple, all of their thing, everything in Israel was the way they ate, the way they dressed, the way they conducted business. Everything was to declare the Sabbath, the rest of the land. Everything was to show who God is to a pagan society. And so when Israel is on the back foot, the world's on trouble. Same as the church. When we're not the church, the world's in trouble. We are the only light the world has. You realize that God is now working through his people, the church, to illuminate himself. The gates of hell will never prevail against the church. God will always have a light. He's always had a remnant. He's always had a light. And it's us now. It's us. So that that's why the devil loves to attack churches. That's why the devil loves to attack pastors. I heard of another pastor this week who has written all these books and now he's come out and admitted he had an adulterous affair. And at first you want to be like, man, but you know what? We're one step away from that. And the reason the devil comes after people like that is not because of what it does to their reputation, but what it does to God's reputation. You see, the world sees that and says, see, you're all hypocrites, you're all liars. What kind of God do you serve? And Israel was losing. Why was Israel losing? Why? And this is really scary. Every time, I don't think there's a, if you find one, let me know. Every time Israel is defeated in the Old Testament, it goes back to defiance and disobedience. When they're obeying God, they win. When they're out in left field, when someone's done wrong, when God's disciplining them from previous act, Saul is out on left field. He has been. And God's about to take Saul out. And in taking Saul out, Israel's on the run. You realize that Saul's sin doesn't just cost him, it costs all those around him. And now Israel, every time in the Old Testament you read that Israel fled or Israel got defeated, go back, somebody's messed it up. Somebody somewhere has messed it up. And again, the devil comes after Israel. Listen, you know why Israel will be attacked again? Because when the church is out of here, when the church goes, guess who God turns to? And as soon as God removes the church and he goes back primarily to Israel, guess who's going to be number one enemy of the devil? Israel again. Because in that day, what God's going to do, think about this. Since Jesus' day, they've missed it. They've missed him. For the most part, the Jews have missed Jesus, his own people. They rejected him. He turned to us, the Gentiles, the church, and when the church is over, he will now, it's almost like Israel's been on pause. You can still get saved in Israel. There's still a few, but not hardly many. But during the tribulation, through the ministry of Elijah and Moses and other people, lots and lots of Jews, in fact a third of them, will be saved. And that Isaiah 53 is a proclamation of what they understand. Man, we thought you were nothing. We thought you were beaten for your own sin, but now we realize you were beaten for our sins, that you were whipped so that we could be healed. And Israel in the tribulation will be protected by God, and the temple will be back, and God will do all of this stuff because through Israel again, God is going to call people to himself. And think about this. All these years, all of this time, and God has promised it in Romans. He's promised it in Revelation that God is going to come back for his people. And Israel that's been on the back burner, God is going to do something amazing. And when Jesus hits the Mount of Olives, it's going to split and the Jews are going to escape. And God's going to have his millennial kingdom with a redeemed Jewish population. It's unbelievable what Jesus is going to do. And yet at this moment, this is why the devil comes after the church. It's why the devil came after Israel in the past and he'll come after Israel in the future. And this is fascinating. It said, many were slaughtered on the slopes of Mount Gilboa. And so God allows his people to be defeated. The Philistines closed in on Saul and his sons. You think about this. The Philistines should have had no chance of killing Saul, but God has given him up. It's time to go. I think he does 40 years, is that right? He's there a long time, and God has been very gracious. And during this time of removing the kingdom from Saul, God's been very gracious to him. And it's almost like God gave him all those years just to hear Saul say, I'm sorry. That's all Saul had to do. And guess what? He feigned it. He said, oh, David, my son, I forgive you. And he didn't. And there's this amazingly sad picture. And the Israel had wanted a king, and remember, he was hiding in the supplies. The best thing he had going for him was he was tall and handsome. And it says the Philistines closed in on Saul and his sons, and they killed 3 of his sons, Aminadab, Malchishua, and who? And Jonathan. Man, that's one of the saddest parts of all of this story, that Jonathan is part of the carnage of Saul. Like Jonathan, we talked about it. Jonathan believed with all of his heart that David was going to be king. He also believed that he would be right there with him. And God, for whatever reason, allows Jonathan to die. Jonathan's been a really great character. But you see, that carnage doesn't just take out crazy people, it takes out good, godly people too. And Saul and David are together, although they're kind of at odds because of David. But Jonathan is there fighting for God. And Saul loses 3 of his sons. Verse 3. The fighting grew very fierce around Saul, and the Philistine archers caught up with him, and they wounded him severely. God, even in that, is teaching everybody. He's teaching Saul. God could have just wiped him out. Right? God could have just killed Saul on the spot. But he allows this to play out just exactly how it's meant to play out. What do you think Saul was thinking when he got severely injured? What have the last 10, 15 years been like? He's just done his own thing. The only thing he cared about was trying to kill David. And you know where it's got him? A death sentence. And he chased it and he chased it and he chased it. And Saul is now going to die on the floor. The Philistine archers caught up with him and they wounded him severely. Isn't it weird that God, who directed the stone to hit Goliath, is now directing the archer to kill his own king? Like, don't be mistaken. That's not an accident, and that's not the Philistines being great at archery. That's God. And God takes the bow and hits him exactly where he needs. You know what God's doing? He hits him so he's severely wounded, but he's not dead. I wonder if you believe that tonight. I wonder if you believe that was chance or just a good archer, or that God totally and utterly directed that bow. If he did, then what in the world are you worried about? If you're telling me that God took the enemy and made sure his bow at the right time in the right place hit Saul just in the right way, and by the way, Saul's got an armor bearer. I'm starting to think armor bearers were overrated. Goliath had one. Saul had one. The problem with being an armor bearer is if your dude goes down, guess who's going down with him? I mean, if you're the king armor bearer and the king, you're not getting employed again. In fact, you're dead. And here is Saul. And you just see Jonathan is dead, and there's a lot of hurt in that. And Saul, this king of Israel who started so well, is just lying wounded on the floor. And you just think, Saul, what were you doing? Why would you do that? And Saul groaned to his armor bearer, take your sword and kill me before these pagan Philistines come to run me through and taunt and torture me. He just asked to die. He wants to die because he figures that he can't move now. He's done. He's so severely injured that he ain't fighting no more. He's on the floor and he turns to his armor bearer and says, just take me out. Because if you don't, the Philistines are going to take me out and they're going to taunt me, and I don't want to do that. But his armor bearer was afraid and wouldn't do it. So Saul took his own sword and what? Now we'll talk about it next week, but I believe he dies right here. When suicide is your best option, you've gone down a bad path. How does the king of Israel, who was anointed and called and chosen by God, end up dying on his own sword? And you know what's crazy? It's not massive things. It's one thing that led to another, that led to another. Like, be careful before you think that can't happen to you. Be careful before you think, well, you see, sometimes we think that if I don't commit the big ones, I'm good. Or actually, we don't really want to, understand what Jesus is saying, because he's like, if you hate someone, you've murdered them. If you lusted after someone, you've cheated. So that's a whole different conversation. But it's like, if we don't murder, if we don't commit adultery, if we don't radically steal, we're good. But if you go back to the very start of this, what one thing started Saul on the journey to suicide? What one emotion, what one mistake did he make? What was it? Well, pride is part of it, but even before that, well, it was kind of with this. Pride would be with it. But it's basically jealousy, right? Remember what started this whole thing was one simple song. You've killed your thousands. But old boy over there, or the young boy over there, he's killed his 10,000s. You've heard that stupid saying, sticks and stones may hurt my bones, but names will never. That's stupid. One thing that was said to Saul led him down this path. Think about that. He heard one song, and this is where it ended up. See, tonight you might think I'm okay. Like there's this thing brewing, but I've got it under control. Like it's only a little bit of bitterness. It's only a little bit of unforgiveness. It's only a little bit of man, and you sit in it, and you sit in it, and you sit in it, and you think, I've got this, I've got this, I've got this. And guess what? And jealousy led to bitterness. Jealousy led him to want to be a murderer. All he could think about was killing David. You see how one little incident, if you go back, and I'm not a psychologist and I don't want to lay on a big red couch and, but we all have moments that changed our lives. That those moments are going to make you bitter or better. The things that happen in your life. That moment when he heard that, he should have, in humility, turned to God, and he refused. And again, it's bizarre, but one little song. And the women singing him, so there's a bit of pride and jealousy and all of that stuff. And now, when God's hand has been taken from him, he falls in his own sword and died beside the king. Saul took his own sword and fell on it. That's a picture, that to me, again, is a picture of, here's the world. God is showing them, God, even through nature and conscience, is reaching out to them. And it's a picture of me, of being in a lake of fire one day and trying to figure out, how did I get here? And man, it wasn't worth it. Like nobody in the end is going to be like, it's fine. Like nobody who misses Jesus is going to be like, whoa, we had a good time doing it. Like that's what, people joke about, I'll see you in hell or whatever. Like they think that's funny, but it's not. And you imagine the pain. And the pain is going to be, I can't believe I swapped that for this. I can't believe I allowed whatever it is, lust or bitterness or brokenness to make me miss this. And Saul is dead. And if you, give me a positive about this. Spin this in a positive way. If you're trying to counsel, if Saul walked in the room and you said, don't worry, what would you say? Man, Saul. And then his armor bearer realized that Saul was dead. And so he fell on his own sword and died beside the king. This idea of Saul, man, there's no protection anymore. That God, Saul, his 3 sons, his armor bearer, and his troops all died together that same day. Because of Saul's disobedience, because of bitterness, this is where sin takes you. This is where sin takes you. You imagine him, his 3 sons, armor bearer, and troops, all dead on the same day. Because he just didn't want to do what God wanted him to do. I don't know what fullness he was chasing, but this isn't a picture of fullness, is it? And I don't want to get to the end of my life and say, man, that one thing that I never got under control has now cost me this. Look at what it says. When the Israelites on the other side of the Jezreel Valley and beyond the Jordan saw that the Israelite army had fled and that Saul and his sons were dead, they abandoned their towns and fled. So not only now has Saul died, his armor bearer is dead, his sons are dead, some of the troops are dead, but the people on the other side of the valley, beyond the Jordan, they saw that the Israelite army had fled. And this is again why how you live your life really matters to other people. Like because the Israelites who are fighting the Philistines are fleeing. They're screaming. They're crying. They're groaning. They're messed up. And other Israelites see it and they get what? When you see other Christians like in fear and running and broken, sometimes it messes you up, doesn't it? Like, this is all a domino effect, like because of Saul and because of his truth. Now people are dying. And the other Israelites, they're living in their town. And they get so scared, they get fear, and they think the best thing to do is what? And so in running out their towns, they left the towns wide open, and now the Philistines occupy it. They've given up. They run away, and the Philistines. And you see, when Philistines are occupying Israel's towns, it's hard to tell them that God is God. That's the heinousness of Israel's sin. Because the more you slide, the harder it is to tell people about God. The next day, when the Philistines went out to strip the dead, they found the bodies of Saul and his 3 sons on Mount Gilboa. So they cut off Saul's head. David had cut Goliath's head, and now they cut off Saul's head. And they stripped off his armor. Not good his armor did, huh? You see, you can protect yourself with all the armor you want. But God can do whatever he wants to do. He had an armor bearer in armor, and a bow still got him. Or bow and arrow, whatever. They cut off his head, they strip off his armor. And listen, remember earlier with Dagon? How God had moved and God had thrown him on the floor? And you see, this is where they proclaimed the good news of Saul's death in their pagan temple and to the people throughout the land of Philistia. What was their good news? What were they happy about? I don't think they're really overly scared of Saul. He didn't win a whole lot. Why do they feel good that time? Why do they feel good at this point? Because they think their gods have come through for them. They think they've beaten God. It looks like they've beaten God. They're so excited because Saul dying means maybe there is no God. Maybe we don't have to change. Maybe we are on the right path. And they, imagine this, they're celebrating Saul's death in their pagan temple and the people throughout the land of Philistia. You know how hard that is at that moment to preach the gospel? To tell them that our God wins, because they look and they're like, he don't win, we just won. And they've got Saul's head to prove. See, as much as we take Goliath's head and celebrate, they took Saul's head and celebrated. Does that make sense? Like, Goliath's head to us is proof of what? That God wins. Saul's head to them is proof to them that God loses. Now, he doesn't, but that's what it looks like. They placed his armor in the temple of the Ashtaroth, and they fastened his body to the wall of the city of Bethshan. But when the people of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all their mighty warriors traveled through the night to Bethshan and took the body of Saul and his sons down from the wall. This is crazy. You know, no matter what, when people, there is a point when you do something for people, they never forget. Oh, that should be it, right? Sometimes you do for people and they seem to forget. But do you remember in 1 Samuel chapter 11? That was a long time ago. But God makes this treaty, and God helps out these people. He helps out these people, and let me read it. About a month later, 1 Samuel 11:1, King Nahash of Ammon led his army against the Israelite town of Jabesh Gilead. And remember how they were threatened, but Saul and God won the battle for them? That they were threatened to gouge out their eyes, and God stepped in for them. God used Saul to save Jabesh Gilead. And so now that Saul's dead, guess who comes? The people from Jabesh Gilead. And so these people come. And they heard what the Philistines had done to Saul. All their mighty warriors traveled through the night to Bethshan and took the body of Saul and his sons down from the wall. They brought them to Jabesh, where they burned the bodies And they took their bones and buried them beneath the tamarisk tree at Jabesh, and they fasted for 7 days. No royal burial, nothing like that. Just to burn the bodies and the bones get by a tree. But what God had done for Jabesh Gilead, they didn't forget. God had used Saul at the start in amazing ways, and the people of Jabesh Gilead understood that, and they wanted to thank God. They wanted to honor Saul, and so they come and get his body, his sons, their bones, and they bury them beneath this tree, and they fast for 7 days. And as we pray tonight, it's amazing, because David doesn't know any of this has happened. David has no idea this has happened. And he's going to spend 2 days at Ziklag before he finds out. And so as David sits in Ziklag on the 3rd day, he finds out, next week we'll see, that Saul has been killed. And Jonathan. And all of this stuff is going to transpire. But it's really, really interesting to me that tonight you might be sitting here and you don't even know what's happened yet. Like we play Monday morning quarterback, we know that Saul is dead. But when you get to 2 Samuel chapter 21, David doesn't. And David is sitting in Ziklag. The whole town's been burnt. I don't know what he's doing, but God has given him days to reflect. Maybe he thinks he's got to build. I mean, where does he go from here? Where does David go from here? And God has him just for a moment sit down. And God in this time, what I'm telling you is, sometimes we don't see what God's doing. Sometimes we have no idea what's happened. Like 2 days ago, something could have happened that you are yet to know about, but God has got it. So when you're sitting there in life and you don't understand and you don't know what to do, it may be just possible that God has already moved. You're praying for God to move, and he's already moved. Like David is sitting in Ziklag with zero knowledge that Saul is dead. And so he's sitting in Ziklag. I don't know what he's praying. I don't know what he's hoping for, but God has already taken care of it. And maybe, just maybe, when you're here and you don't know what's going on and you don't know where to turn and you think there's no end in sight and you don't understand it, maybe God's like, hold on, tomorrow you'll find out. Tomorrow you'll find out that days ago I did something that you don't even know about. Don't misunderstand that when you pray, that's the only time God can start. Like you don't have to pray that day for it to start. God's already done it weeks ago, knowing that you would. I mean, but God has taken care of everything. And if that picture of Saul doesn't make you want to I don't want to waste my life like that. And I don't know what it is that you find hard to share. I don't know what it is that the Lord's like, I gave you this and now you won't share it. But I pray we figure that out, each of us, and I pray that we'll let our hands off. And we'll see how David becomes this amazing person, and he's about to be king of Judah. And God has worked in him, and God is showing him, and God is changing him. And I find it amazing. Right before he's anointed, he kind of just has this moment of Ziklag. It's almost like this meditation of, this is who I am. And so in those still moments, don't rush out of them. Let God just rest you. Let him do something. And man, God has taken care of David for all of these years, for all of these chapters. And what's the biggest challenge as we get into next week? The biggest challenge David has is he got all his stuff back, right? He got his wives back. They all got plunder. But you know what he can't get back? All of those days that Saul chased him. And so he could sit there and think, man, I just wasted 10 or 15 years of my life being on the run from this guy. And yet in all of those 10 and 15 years, God didn't waste any of that. God used it, and God challenged him, and God changed him. God wasn't ready for David to be king straight away. And so for 10 or 15 years. So don't get overly excited. Don't jump boat. Don't get ahead of yourself. You know one of the truths that we have to understand is sometimes we're not ready for what we think we're ready for. And we should instead of getting mad, we should thank God that he said, do you ever look back and say, God, I'm so grateful you didn't answer that request. I'm so grateful that you said no. I thought I was ready. And I look back in my life at times where I thought I was ready to go. And I wasn't. And it's really, really hard to understand. It's really hard to accept. There's been several times where it didn't make sense. Like I'd been to Bible college. You know, when you go to Bible college and you sit and you graduate, you think, man, I'm going to be preaching pretty soon. And I'm ready, right? I know it. I got it. I got my degree. Woo! It's frightening to realize how little I did know. And it took me a long time. It took me a long time to get into preaching. And I'd sit there in services and we'd go to church and nobody knew me and nobody was offering me a chance. And I'd just sit there. And I'd think, God, what are we doing? And thank God for Tasha. Tasha would tell me the things that she needed to tell me that I didn't want to hear. We'd go to eat and I'd say, I'm just going to do this. And she'd just look at me and say, really? I was like, yeah, I could do that. I could coach or do something. She's like, are you going to be happy? Okay. No. Then why are we talking about this? I don't know. I just wanted to vent a little bit. But I can't tell you how faithful God has been. And in all the hard times, in all the times where I've been down, in all the times where I thought, God, what are you doing? I'm ready. I wasn't ready. But at just the right time, in just the right way, he makes you ready. And then when you're ready to go. But don't worry about your down times. Don't worry about sitting around at Ziglag for a minute. God's done stuff in your life that you don't even know about. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts?